Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar, ADR in the time of COVID-19, how neutrals and advocates can use Zoom for mediation and arbitrations. This is Anna Hirschenberg. I'm the Vice President of Programs and Public Policy at CPR, and we are thrilled to welcome everybody. We hope that everybody is staying healthy and safe, and CPR is continuing to develop resources like today's webinar to help our members and neutrals navigate through these unprecedented times. We will be recording today's webinar and posting it on our new resources page of our website, which is called ADR in the time of COVID-19. And this recording will be available to the public. We will also be circulating a link to a Dropbox with today's PowerPoint and additional resources on how to mediate and arbitrate on Zoom. So for some housekeeping, we just ask that everybody mute their phones and their computer mics. You can check on the side to make sure that it's red with a line through it. And you can post any questions that you have using the Zoom chat feature as well. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our presenter for today, Thomas Valenti. Thomas is an attorney, a mediator, arbitrator, facilitator, and trainer, and we're pleased to also have him as a member of CPR's panel of distinguished neutrals. Tom has been extensively trained on all aspects of dispute resolution. He's a board member of Mediators Beyond Borders International. He's given keynote addresses on interfaith and multicultural dialogues at dispute resolution conferences in London, and he's just fantastic. And Thomas, we're thrilled to have you here to lead us through this.
Thanks, Anna. First of all, we're going to get right to it, but I wanted to thank Alan, Helena, Richard, Anna, and Olivier that decided to put something like this together. This is not my first time in talking about Zoom. Full disclosure, I have a Zoom professional account. That's what we're going to be talking about today, is a Zoom professional account, not the Zoom free account. I have no relationship with them. It just happens to be what I've chosen to use in my practice. And some of that emanated from some co-training I did with a gentleman named Giuseppe Leone, who really is for many people the dean of online mediation, not online dispute resolution, but online mediation, emanating out of a project that he did from his home base in Hawaii for the ACR Hawaii branch. And so what we're going to do today is we added a segment to this at the beginning that talks about the security issues that are on a lot of your minds. And so let me just share the PowerPoint. We're gonna have 2 times for Q&A, one after the first break, which is on security issues. And Olivier Andre is going to participate with me on that because he was instrumental in some of the CPR security protocols and things like that. And so there'll be ample time at the end for Q&A. Let's, if you're watching the screen, you can see what I'm doing is you're going to learn a bit along the way. So I just went to the bottom, the green box says share screen. I'm going to share my screen with you now, and you're going to see a PowerPoint. So we already know we can share a PowerPoint in Zoom. So this is today's session. What are we going to try to do today? We're going to really talk about using an online platform for mediations and arbitrations. We're going to talk about the security issues that may concern us. And actually in the last week or so, we've seen more security issues, all of them quite manageable. I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer on how you might set up your account in Zoom to protect against some of that and to make it suitable for your practice. And I'm going to give you some specific examples of how I've used it, or you can use it in arbitration, and also you can use it in mediation. There'll be some video demonstrations of both of those. I'm not going to play the full videos in our session today because they're going to be made available to you in the Dropbox. Then at the end, we're going to be talking about your concerns or any questions. After the first session, we're going to be doing that as well. Here's kind of how I laid out the agenda. We're going to spend about 20 minutes at the initial on security concerns, setting up your Zoom account, 25 minutes on the arbitration segment, 25 minutes on the mediation segment, and then we'll have 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. And so at the outset, even there were some comments in the room before we began our session about Zoom bombing and people crashing Zoom rooms. That certainly has happened recently. And it's probably because there's been a huge influx in the users of Zoom. Most of those are in the online classroom setting. But there's lots of things within the Zoom platform itself that you can use to stop that from happening. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. But for our general practice, what we worry about cybersecurity issues, we would encourage you to use your own network of information. A good resource is the ICCA New York City Bar CPR protocol on cybersecurity. That entire protocol will be in the Dropbox that you'll get. That's a good reference point for you to look at and determine which things you should be concerned about if you're moving to online mediation or online arbitration, or really any online tools. In particular, Schedule A, which is a separate section, I put that in there as a separate standalone document. That's a really good thing for you to look at. That checklist is quite helpful to you to ask yourself some questions. Olivier Andre, who's on the call, was instrumental in the working group, and he's graciously spent a lot of his time to put that together, and is going to make himself available for Q&A if there are some additional concerns or questions that you have after this beginning part of the session. Keep in mind that security measures are just guidelines. We have to decide which ones are pertinent to our practice. They're obviously quite different in an arbitration setting than they are in perhaps a small claims mediation or even a smaller mediation matter. Each set of guidelines should be fine-tuned to the practice that you have. Finally, the spirit of that protocol, that it's a framework within which we ask ourselves questions and make decisions for our practice. And so when you look through that protocol, think about it as teaching you what are the questions you have to ask yourself to make sure that you, your clients, attorneys you may be working with, or other parties, their data is protected and yours is as well. There's really two issues. One is data that may be exchanged via email and things like that. And in the Zoom platform, we don't really exchange emails or documents. That's all done outside the online process. And we'll talk about that more in just a bit. So here's the Zoom professional program platform has many tools available to you, already built in to you as the host of a meeting. And when I say host, I'm referring to you as a practitioner that invites someone to your Zoom meeting room to have a session, whether that's an attorney-client conference, an online mediation, or part of an online arbitration process. So the host is the person who owns the account, who invites others to it. And so all meetings are encrypted end-to-end. You can use a very highly recommended process that CPR used to invite you to this session. I believe you were all invited the same way I was. There was a set of numbers to log you into a meeting and a password. So we're comfortable knowing that no one is in this meeting who didn't have access to a password. Each of you had your own password because that's the way CPR set that up. With regard to your own personal account, you can do exactly the same thing. There's tools within your setup that allow you to do that. And so you can secure your meeting, whatever kind of meeting it is, with the same methodology that we're attending here today, a username and a password. So inside the meeting, these are some concerns that people have that Zoom has addressed itself. What tools are available in setting up your account to make sure that you don't have people crashing it? Or how do you manage if someone does get access to the room without your permission? We know about the end-to-end encryption, There's a tool called Waiting Room where you can invite people to your Zoom room, and they're not allowed into the session until you grant permission for all of those people to come in. You can see in the waiting room before you give permission to see if there's anybody not invited into your session. That's built in to the platform. It also allows you to keep people out of that meeting until the host is there. So no one is in your meeting room until you show up. Quite a common way that we address that concern. It also gives you the right to remove any participant at any point in time. You can do that one by one, or you can actually elect to end the meeting as a device as well. If there's, someone mentioned the Zoom bombing with pornography and things like that. If there's something untoward happening like that, you can click the end meeting now and stop that from happening immediately if you haven't followed the appropriate security protocols to set up your room. You have that as a backup plan. We also have a way to lock the meeting. So if I was doing a mediation or an arbitration and all the parties were already present, and I don't want to worry about seeing how many participants were in the room, I can lock the meeting, and that makes it certain that no one else can enter my meeting room once I put the lock on the door. We have within Zoom the ability for us to use breakout rooms where we can have a private conversation with one participant or all the participants. Quite useful in mediation. We enable that breakout rooms when we set up our account. I can actually, in an online arbitration, I can put a lawyer in Chicago and a client in Wisconsin in their own private room to have a private attorney-client conversation. So we use breakout rooms that are secured as well. We saw that we were muting and unmuting participants. As the host, I can do that. For people who are new with Zoom, they're not quite sure with all the controls, so we can manage their uncertainty about what to do from the host control panel. You can actually use screen sharing watermarks. I've never had the occasion to do that. They're available to you if you have some particular documents that you need to protect with watermarks. There's audio signatures. There's lots of other tools available to you in your account setup program. Some of you are logging in from an app, but when you first set up your account, and the account is quite easy to set up, the version that we're talking about, the Zoom Pro version, I think it's $15 a month in the US. And there's a discount, usually a couple month discount. So maybe for $150 a year, you can have the full professional account. And you don't pay a whole lot for any extra add-ons or anything unless you want to do webinars and more sophisticated things. And then you can create some upgrades on a month-by-month basis. And so let's look at the Zoom, the security concerns for in the meeting. The content is encoded. You can set the means for anybody to enter the room. It's entirely dependent upon the connections you establish on a session-by-session basis. So for example, I can set up parameters for a password on this session, and maybe tomorrow's session, I don't want to use passwords or certain sharing things that I don't really want other people to do. So each session that you have, you can tailor to the kind of session you're conducting. They might be quite different if you're just using Zoom's video conferencing features to have a preparation meeting with your client. So you can encrypt all the screen sharing content. You can encrypt the entire connection. It's all there for you already. It also allows us to have visual identification, as we can see today, if we have people using their video. If you're concerned that there's somebody who logs in without their name on the screen, you can ask some people some questions and maybe even throw them out of the room. We can see here, I can see on my video panel, there's somebody whose video is on, but it's just showing kind of a blurred out screen. if I didn't know that this was a password protected meeting, I probably would ask whoever that person is to identify themselves and make sure that they belong in our session. Here's one of the best features that I find with Zoom is their help page. And this is a screenshot of the many tools that they have available to you when you log into your account. There's a support page. This is a screenshot of most of it, not all of it. But anything you have a question about, there's a white paper on. There's a couple of white papers put in your Dropbox just for your background, particularly the security white paper that you see referenced about a third of the way down on this screenshot. So anything that you think might be useful to you, you can find information there. Zoom also has a pop-up that someone will, if you're roaming around there, there's a chat box and you'll see that someone will say, can I help you with something? And so they have online assistance available to you. I think it's 24/7. I haven't any direct experience that it be 24/7, but they're always available. I've used it when I set up a webinar somewhere and automatically someone was there and walked me through the entire process for doing something I had never done before. So if you have any problems setting up your account or any concerns about anything, they're available to you pretty much on the spot. And so the Zoom help feature is something you should make use of. Let's talk a bit about setting up your account, and then we'll go to Q&As about security, because some of the features that I'm going to show you here will answer some of your questions about how you might want to set up your account. Now, keep in mind, when you're setting up your account, you're not going to be able to do it from the app. You're going to go to the website, and all these features are available in setting up your account on the website. And so you log in through whatever your browser is into your Zoom account and go to account settings. And each of these gives you some options available to you that you will consider based upon your particular practice. Some of these will be the same for everything you do. Some of these you will tailor to meet the needs for the next session you're having. This is, and all of these are boxes like this, so you can see on host video, I've clicked that on already. That means I want my video on when I open the meeting. You don't have to do that. That's just my choice. Participants video on, I don't do that. I don't say participants video must always be on when they join. You could decide to do that depending upon what you're doing, but I think for most of my practice, I'd rather have the participant choose whether they want their video on or not. Especially nowadays when we're doing so much work from home in different settings, and it's a little bit obtrusive to automatically have a participant's video on, when sometimes we're really not doing a formal session. You can set the audio type to be telephone only, computer only, or both. I recommend you do both because we never know who's calling in from what device. The beauty of Zoom is you can use any kind of device, PC, Mac, iPhone, Android phone, iPad, any device, or just a plain telephone. You can a cell phone, a smartphone. And so I choose telephone and computer audio in my setup, and I don't allow participants to join the meeting before I get on. Then we go to your personal meeting ID. This is, you'll see at the top of the screen, at least the screen I'm looking at, there's a green box. You see that at the very top of your screen that says 665-965-756. That's the PMI, that's the personal meeting ID for, I don't know if it's CPR or Richard or whoever set this up, but that's his personal meeting ID, or that's the meeting ID that they're using for this session. And so you have the option of having that be always the meeting ID for your sessions, or you can have them assign randomly an arbitrary meeting ID. You can decide what's best for you. Sometimes if we're doing a and nowadays everybody's doing some kind of webinar device through Zoom, you may not want to use your personal meeting ID if you're putting on social media, I'm conducting a Zoom training today, because everybody who gets that link has your personal meeting ID. And your personal meeting ID, for me, is my account forever. So you can use the randomly selected personal meeting ID for things that you're broadcasting to the public on social media accounts, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever devices you use to promote your practice or what you're doing. So be cautious about that. Change it when you're setting up something that's going to be broadcast to the public. Here are some more authentication methods that you can use. Only authenticated users join, require a password. I don't have that set on mine when I took the screenshot of this. CPR used it today, and you can require a password for instant meetings as well. We're going to go on and continue talking about setting up your account. Requiring a password for a personal meeting ID, very good security device, probably should be recommended. You can embed that password in the link. I think you'd see that in the email you got from Richard, that the meeting ID and password were embedded in the link. Very useful device to keep track of your invitations. Require a password for people joining by phone. Optional. It's a little bit, for this session, it would be logical. Some people have a more difficult time using a phone or not. If I have elderly clients, I adjust things accordingly. I don't always require a password because it's a little bit more complicated for some people. Mute participants on entry. You saw we didn't have that set up today, and it can get a little bit confusing if you have a large group like this. We have people asking for coffee and talking about when they're going to go out for their jog and things like that. So you hear a lot of background chatter. Probably a good thing to do is to put that, click that button to blue and have that muted when they enter your room. We got an upcoming meeting reminder today. I don't have that as a default on mine, but it's very useful for people to get that meeting reminder 30 minutes, 10 minutes before, whatever you think is going to work for you in that particular session. Here's some of your security devices. Click this, require encryption, allow people to have private chats. And I auto save the chat, especially on sessions like this, because we can give you all the Q&As that are going on in that chat room as well. Still some basic features in the Zoom account. In mine, I have it set up, I hear a chime when someone enters or leaves the room. That's helpful to me if it just alerts you that you have a new participant. File transferring, you can allow people to send files. Probably useful for some things, but maybe not for all your practices. I don't automatically send feedback to Zoom or share the feedback experience. You can do it if you like. In mine, I often co-host with somebody, so I have a default for co-hosting. There's a polling feature that I use. We don't have that set up for today. I can put people on hold, and you can decide or not to always show that bottom control bar in your Zoom page that you see. Whether or not you like that or not is up to you. Here's what we were struggling with a bit at the beginning of this session, is who can share a screen. I'm sharing my screen with you now. We saw a few people at the beginning that inadvertently shared their screen because they clicked that green box at the bottom. And so it's probably good to have the host only box clicked or the host only when someone else is sharing. You can interrupt that. The annotation device we're going to look at later. It's very useful, and I like to share annotation tools with participants because sometimes I'm having them annotate a document or a picture or something like that. You'll see an example of that later in our arbitration video demo, how we pass the control of the annotation device to the theoretical expert witness who's going to be testifying in that arbitration proceeding. You'll see a good example of that later on. The whiteboard is something I'll show you in a bit. It's basically a blank sheet of paper that is allows us, all of us, to take notes on that, prepare an agenda, or do things like that. It's a very useful tool within Zoom. We can share that as well. I can have any one of you write on that whiteboard. These remote control means I can pass control of the meeting to someone else. These are all very subtle tools you can use about providing nonverbal feedback. You saw the reaction button in the bottom of this screen. We ask people to do a thumbs up. That's not a bad thing. If you're doing a webinar, people can say, I like this or I don't like that. And as someone's just clicking that right now, I can see a thumbs up on a screen. I think you're actually able to fine tune those reactions. Allowed remove participants to rejoin. I have that clicked. For some sessions, you don't want that. If you throw somebody out, you probably want them out for good. That's a useful tool to professors who are doing online training now. But most of us, if someone has to be removed, it's usually because they don't have their audio set right, and we ask them to leave and come back in. And so I allow them to rejoin. So we use breakout rooms. It sounds like it's a complicated thing to do. I'll be able to demonstrate that in the mediation session, how we use breakout rooms. There's many ways of using them for many different purposes. In this era where we're all in different places, it used to be we could have a client and an attorney in the same room. Maybe the client would be at the lawyer's office. Today, that's probably not as easily going to happen. And so we can create a breakout room for a client and an attorney to have a private confidential conversation. That could be in an arbitration setting. It could be in a mediation setting. In mediation, obviously, those are our caucus rooms, the breakout rooms. If we're doing some kind of group facilitation, we can create working groups. If I have a meeting of 20 people, I can divide them into working groups, assign them either with my own decision-making or randomly into breakout rooms and have them work privately. Then I can go around as the host and visit each one of those and give them support or check in with what's going on. There's a closed captioning feature. You can actually save that as a transcript if you find that is applicable to your practice. I've never used this last item where I let somebody else control my camera. I don't know enough about that to give you any information, but if that's something that interests you, that someone would be controlling your camera, I think not. But I would direct you to Zoom to answer that question, because I've never found the need for that, and it sounds a little bit scary to me, because we've heard these about people hacking and taking over our camera. So here's some advanced features that Zoom has for you. You can actually create, if you're doing a recording, you can create HD videos. Really good tool if your system has the bandwidth to do that. You can use, I can put any background instead of my image there. If I want to do that, I can create a special background. I can ask, I can set it up so that we can see the identity of everybody who's on there. And you can see in the participant list, we can see who they are. We can set up some auto answer features in group chat to reply to all or to reply to selected people. And so you can set that up depending upon how your meeting is going to go, how your arbitration or your mediation is going to go. These are some advanced features that talk about how you're inviting people. You can use different ways of doing that. We don't really want always to share email information with lots of people, so it allows you to blind copy people and do that. There's some other features about stereo sound and all of that, which are suitable for some people, that like headphones, and for some reason they prefer stereo sound. I don't click it. I allow you to choose this kind of sound setting that you want for your own purposes. Attention tracking is an odd tool that has somehow become, I think someone is annotating this now, maybe some marks on that screen, but it allows the Zoom platform to see if somebody has left the room, that everything is on, but there's some kind of device that allows you. Somebody is annotating the screen now, so thanks for the demo. Are you able to see that as well? Okay, we'll actually do a demonstration of that, but this is what can be done within the platform. There's often good reasons to allow this to happen when we're demonstrating something to someone. But if you can erase that, whoever did that, because it's going to keep appearing on the screen until we're done.
I don't know how to erase it.
There's an eraser tool. If you go all the way to the right of the annotation bar, or just click undo 3 times.
Oh.
There you go, one more undo. Nope, that's all right, thank you. And so for webinars and things like that, we could be live streaming this. And we've done that in certain places where we have a meeting like this and we can set it up to be live streamed on some social media device. These are leftover settings from something I did recently where we actually did a live stream. And so very advanced features depending upon your practice. Let's go briefly through some of the things that you may have seen on the screen. So in that bottom window, you were able to see some of these features that's what we would call the dashboard. The bottom of the window of the Zoom window has the ability for you to mute and unmute your microphone, mute or turn off or turn on your video. You can invite other participants. You can manage the participants. That means if you click that, there's going to be a list of all the participants on the right-hand side of your screen. You can turn their mic on or off. You can turn their video on or off, and you can expel them from the room. You can remove them. The polling feature is not on the screen that's here, allows you to create a poll. And that's quite a useful feature for something like this. We were going to do a poll, but for a technical reason, it wasn't set up. I have it set up on my account to ask you, does anybody have a Zoom account? Anybody already use Zoom? Who uses, who plans on using it as an arbitrator, as a mediator, or as an advocate? And so within about 2 minutes, you could have all answered that and we would all see the data. So we would know out of the 175 of you, 48 are arbitrators, so many are mediators, and we could figure out what the pulse of the room was. And this screen here shows the breakout room feature. When we do annotations on the top where it says screen share, if we click the annotation icon, we're going to see these items that allow us to select text, draw, stamp, spotlight, eraser. We're gonna demonstrate all of those in a little bit. And so these are just a couple of the features that you'll see as we go through our session today, and we're going to show you how to do that, and of course encourage you to practice doing that. So you think you're ready because you know a little bit about Zoom, but what we forget as advocates, if we, and you're going to practice this, but right now, our clients don't know much about it. And so we might think we're ready because you've done some work, you've set up your account, you've talked to the Zoom helpline, you've done a lot of information, but you haven't figured out yet whether your clients are ready. And so prepare your parties. And that's one of the things we have to add to our practice now is we can't just be Zoom ready or online ready. We have to make sure that our clients are comfortable with it as well. And so how do we do that? We kind of assess whether they're competent in Zoom or in some platform. And keep in mind, besides Zoom Professional, there's lots of other products out there that you can use. Zoom is quite easy to use, and we use it for a variety of reasons. But let's make sure that before you do your first Zoom session, you've taken a measure of your clients or whoever's going to be participating in whatever it is, and seen if they're ready. How do we do that? For me, in a mediation, I decide to have a pre-mediation conference with the parties, or the parties and their lawyers, or separately or together. And that gives me the opportunity to try Zoom and show them how it's going to work. In that session, I can actually demonstrate the breakout room so that they have some sense of confidence about the confidentiality afforded by the caucus feature in Zoom, the breakout room. What I'll do in that pre-mediation conference, if I have a client and an attorney separate, I'll put the client in one room and the attorney in another room. I'll ask the client some questions. I'll check in with the lawyer and say, did you hear anything? And I'll do it the other way. And so that gives them some trust in the process. I can show them if I know, if I'm preparing for an arbitration and I know that a witness is going to need to use the annotation features, I can teach the lawyer how to do that. And then he can teach the witness, or we can do that together. And so let's get them ready before we start our official mediation or our official arbitration. Considering the capacity or ability of your clients is crucial in order for you to become really, really comfortable in doing it. You can be very comfortable in doing an online session, but if your clients aren't, it's a failure, right? And so let's prep our parties before we start our session. Prep yourself and then prep your parties. You're going to explain, what I do is some kind of short orientation sessions. I tell them why, if it's their first experience, why Zoom is secure and safe, demonstrate a few features to it, explain that it's really not perfect. Because in reality, I can see some people that it appears to be that you're alone, but I don't know if somebody is sitting off camera in your room, right? If I'm doing a mediation session in face-to-face, I know who's in my mediation room. But in reality, when I'm doing it online, I have no guarantee that there's not somebody sitting off camera. Nor do I have a guarantee that you're not recording it. But by the same token, you can be recording my face-to-face mediation session on your iPhone that's sitting in your pocketbook or your desk or whatever. So we explain to people that it's not perfect, but we do some things to reassure them. We ask at the beginning of a mediation session, is there anyone else present in the room you're sitting in now? Do you agree that you're not going to invite somebody else in? Do you agree you're not going to record this? And so we do some steps along the way that build the confidence and trust of all the parties to it. In fact, in most arbitrations that we do, we record that automatically, and it creates a record that's maybe not even available to them in another fashion, with the permission of all the parties in that session. So let's look at Zoom, maybe not to replace everything. Nowadays, it might, until we get through this COVID crisis, it might be replacing your normal practice, or you may decide to do it as a step until we can get back face-to-face. Do some pre-mediation sessions, incorporate this. This is not, the last S in this is not stupid, it's superhero. If you can't see it, but keep it simple, superhero. And so you're going to have some new tools, and you want to incorporate some of these tools into your practice. You're also going to be able to use text messaging, email, and phone calls as supplemental tools to face-to-face work. You may get documents via your email. You may do conferencing by Zoom, and you may in fact do arbitration hearings or mediations, full mediations by Zoom. So within the kind of practice you have, you're going to use all these different tools, Zoom, text, email, phone calls, to create an opportunity for you to continue your practice in these days. And everybody is doing it. We have to get our skills up in order to keep ourselves busy and have some level of comfort. And the clients still have the same needs. We just have to offer them the tools to be able to meet those needs now. The conflicts are out there, the arbitrations are scheduled, the mediations are scheduled. We just don't have a way to make them happen. And so this session is designed as a way to make all of us productive during these next months. And so remember, you're going to practice these tools in your leisure before you have your sessions. And that's really what I think is going to make us all better at it, is to recognize that we can't learn it from one session. We got to practice a little bit. When I started doing this, I would practice with friends. I would have a phone call with a buddy of mine or something like that, a video conference, and I would practice my annotations. I would practice drawing on documents. I would show this, I would show that, and we can do that. Most of us are kind of locked into our home, so we all have people that are looking for something to do. Use them as your practice partner. And so before we go to Zoom in arbitration, let's go to a Q&A primarily about security issues. not the techniques for setting up your account or the demonstrations of annotations, because we're going to do more of that in a bit. But because Olivier, Olivier, are you online? Let's unmute Olivier. And we're going to have a Q&A now that addresses only security issues about the Zoom account. Some have some questions about bombing, Zoom bombing, and all of that. But let's get that off the table, and then we'll save the Q&A at the end for the Zoom technical tool. So let's open up the Q&A. Anything about cybersecurity issues that you're concerned about? Any specific questions that we can answer for you? Everybody's unmuted now, and so how about if we unmute everybody? And
so everyone has the option to unmute themselves. So if you feel like you want to ask a question, you haven't sent it in the chat, maybe just unmute yourself and speak, or just type it in the chat there. Would that be best?
Sure. Yeah. So you want to mute everybody again, and they can unmute themselves.
So Anna just let me know that she is organizing questions from the chat. So if you've already asked a question in the chat, don't worry. Anna will broadcast that. We'll have a list going. But so yeah, any other questions, just go ahead and maybe put them in the chat. Anna can add it to the list.
So this is Tom Brewer. You said at the start that this webinar will be recorded and posted on the CPR website. Would it be appropriate to direct counsel in a particular case to watch it? Would they have access?
Somebody at CPR, from my standpoint, I don't mind that. I'm going to also, hopefully we'll give you that recording in this shared Dropbox folder. And from that folder, you're able, each of you on the call is able to download that yourselves. And I don't mind you, I'm not going to stand in the way of that, but I would let the CPR team answer that as well. So from me, I don't object, but Anna, maybe you have a comment about that.
Sure, that would be fine. We will be posting this recording of this webinar on our website under our resources page. We specifically created a resources page called ADR in the time of COVID-19, and it will be available there as soon as we pull it off of Zoom.
So here's a question from Deb Hilton. I plan to use as a mediator and arbitrator in different matters. Would it be better not to use the personal meeting ID? I think if I'm working with my clients, my mediation parties or whatever, I don't mind using my personal ID all the time. I'm leery of using it in a webinar. And so I think the beauty of the personal meeting ID is that it's easy for people to use. And so for our really private practices, I don't think you should be too concerned about using your own personal meeting ID. But if you have a pretty contentious matter, I know, for example, those who manage family disputes, that was one of the reasons why we went with Zoom, because in Zoom, rather than Skype, if I'm using Skype, I get your Skype ID, and that is shared with the other parties. And in some family disputes where we do that online because of potential domestic violence issues, we don't want to share emails, new email account information, or Skype addresses with the violent parties. And so that's why we thought Zoom is a better thing, because there's a lot of anonymity with Zoom that we don't have in other methodologies where we see emails, email IDs and Skype chats. But I think for my private practice, I've always used my personal meeting ID.
Thanks.
Answer, Sarah, I don't have any idea what percentage of people use Zoom. I think it was the default until now, because it's quite cost effective. It's quite intuitive to use. And for some people, that was just the most popular thing. It became very popular recently. But there's other platforms that people are using that do more than just manage video conferencing. There are platforms out there now that do case management as well. And so if you're interested in something beyond what we've talked about already, there's other platforms that manage your cases for you. And it depends upon your practice and how long you think we're going to be in this environment. What we do know about Zoom is you can go month to month, right? And so, you know, for in my currency, in U.S. currency, $14.99. I mean, you can have an account now before the day is over, and your investment in Zoom, aside from your time, is $15. Some of the other platforms are more expensive and offer you much more. But to get you back in business or get your clients access to you, this is a pretty good solution. I don't know the difference because I've never used WebEx, Sarah, for because my preference clearly is Zoom.
Yeah,
but if anybody else on the call wants to answer,
I have used WebEx. I use WebEx on a daily basis with clients. I've never used it in an arbitration. And so my clients are extremely familiar with WebEx, and I now personally use Zoom all day long. But I just didn't know the difference in capabilities between WebEx and Zoom.
Does WebEx give you caucus rooms, private rooms?
To tell you the truth, I haven't checked that yet. I use it right now for editing documents, whereas I used to have in-house meetings to do that, to do page turns. Now we do WebEx all day long.
So, Olivier, we have a question for you. Are there additional encryption tools? This is a Zoom question, though, but it's for you. Are there additional encryption tools beyond password secured, non-public Wi-Fi, what Zoom offers and recommended already this morning?
Olivier let me know that he's having trouble unmuting. So Olivier, maybe you can answer that question in the group chat on the side.
That would be great. I'm scrolling up, Anna, if you see a question that we should address now before we move on. Yeah, Dean Burrell says he's asked parties to scan the room with the camera to confirm there's no one else attending. Good strategy, good technique. I don't know, Lingson, I don't know how the tracking. There's a link on the Zoom website what that does for you, but I don't use it and I don't know enough about it to answer that. How do the participants know I'm not listening in if they're trying to have a private caucus? They don't, except that when you go into that room, you're showed as an attendee. So if they're paying attention to the room, they don't know that. But if they can mute their microphone while they're in the private room, and so you won't hear them. You can observe them if they left their cameras on. But in the mediation session, I'm gonna tell you about something I developed that kind of is a protection against that. And so we advise people to turn their mic off and their video off. And so there is no broadcast of sound or video in the caucus. If I'm in that caucus with them, because I want to be there, that's what we can do. I'll tell you about that. I call it the door knock, and we'll talk about that in the mediation session.
And Tom, there were two questions about whether you can make any of the initial sort of setup options, if you can change that both after you've scheduled the meeting and actually during the Zoom meeting.
I see Noah had that question too. I don't think you can always change it before you started your meeting. I don't think you can make any changes during your meeting, but if you feel the need to do that, it's very easy to tell people, I'm going to end the meeting for 5 minutes and invite you back 5 minutes later, and go back, log into your account, make the change that you find necessary, and then do that. A few of the things are available from the dashboard. Like I'm clicking, if you can see it now, on the share screen. And it says one participant can share at a time. Are you able to see that? I can change that feature during the session. I can change the advanced sharing options to multiple features, but depending upon which feature you want to change, it's available during the session or not. So screen share options are available to be changed by the host during the session. See any other questions? Anybody have, Miranda, do you see anything pressing?
No, I think we should move on to the arbitration section, and then we can take questions at the end.
All right. So thanks, everybody. And we'll be back at the end for more questions. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to go back to sharing that screen. And we're going to be taking a look at using Zoom in arbitration. Oops, sorry. So what we want to really talk about is Zoom as an online tool and what we might do it. Let's remind ourselves why people have chosen arbitration. We know all this already. We'll go through it very quickly. It's supposed to be fast, supposed to be cost efficient. It's supposed to be flexible. And all of those things are dependent upon your skills. And so you all gained a reputation in arbitration because you were able to manage some of those things. But let's look at online tools as an additional tool. Right now, the e-arbitrator schools that you can apply are going to be mandatory to set you out, set you apart from the crowd. So gaining some tools, you want to use technology to make you stand out amongst your peers. And this is one simple online tool that you can do that has many features available to you. You can figure out how it works for cases that are brand new, that are coming in where you just got appointed an arbitrator, or maybe you're an advocate for a party and you need to do something right away and somebody's telling you because of COVID we can't have sessions, and you can suggest that we can have an online session. We have a panel here in Chicago where there's commercial cases that are assigned to arbitration. They've decided to stop all of those happening. I was dealing with the administrator yesterday saying, why don't we do online? Why don't we let these sessions go ahead? She said, the court's not set up for that. And I said, the court doesn't have to be set up for that. Only the arbitrator has to be set up for it. The parties, all these lawyers are looking for work, right? They're all in their office. They want a matter to go forward, and we should be giving them the opportunity, to bring their matters to it. And so you can market yourselves as having the capacity to do this. And so let's look at where we're going to look at 3 different opportunities, and arbitration has many, many steps. We're going to focus on, for today's session, how we might use Zoom in a preliminary meeting, that initial pre-hearing conference, how we might use that in a discovery dispute, where there's actually some e-discovery issue that we're going to have a hearing on it, and we might use it as an opportunity to take testimony as well. And so if we are having an initial pre-hearing conference, now remember the CPR Rule 9 tells us as arbitrators or parties as advocates in an arbitration, it tells us that the likelihood under Rule 9.3 is we're going to have some kind of pre-hearing conference that's going to cover all of these steps. And there's a whole series of steps that we as arbitrators or members of a tribunal want to conduct quite early in the process. And I think you'll find the whole set of rules in your Dropbox folder. Take a particular look at 9.3 when you're thinking about how you might manage a pre-hearing conference. And so if I'm doing a pre-hearing conference by, and many times now we do that with just on the phone. You can add a video conference capability to that instead of just doing a telephone pre-hearing conference for 2 purposes. One is it's going to familiarize yourself with the online capability of those parties and those advocates. Second, you're going to be able to use this as an opportunity to talk to them about perhaps going to hearing using a video conference available. And so I think to switch from a simple audio call for your initial pre-hearing conference to a video call will help you move those parties along to maybe using the video capability of Zoom or some other platform for the hearing itself. And we'll look at that now. If I was going to have, I'm going to share a different document here, and I've just taken, because it's a simple form that we use in. Are you able to see this? It's a form from FINRA. Are you able to see the their pre-hearing scheduling order? I'm going to stop the share and we'll start over, and you'll see it. So here's a document that might be our guide, and you might have your own order filled out, and this will guide the parties through that pre-hearing conference. And you can populate it with some information already. In this particular case, I called the case, I just make up a bunch of names, but we're gonna walk these people through the order line by line. And they're gonna be able to get the opportunity to see what's coming, what we're gonna do. We're gonna complete this order together online. Maybe you don't wanna have a form order online for them. Maybe you want to, because you're showing them how you can draft a document together, or how you can edit the document together at a hearing stage. And so I use it to do that. It's not necessary that you put this on the screen. You might have it off screen. You might just use the video conference availability for them to see each other, get to know each other. Keep in mind that many times in an arbitration setting, the parties haven't seen each other, and certainly the advocates may not have either. And so video conferencing capability early on for initial pre-hearing conference gives you the ability to kind of assess the team. What do I have to work with as an arbitrator? What do I have to work with as a member of a tribunal? In the tribunal settings, it's really helpful. If you have a 3-member panel, it's really helpful to get the lay of the land amongst your tribunal by using a Zoom conference as well, instead of just a phone call. Quite efficient. Check with your tribunals and make sure that they don't have any guidelines or things in the way of doing conferences by video. Certainly a private conference amongst members of the tribunal is well within your prerogative to do that, sharing images and things like that. And you can actually share documents as well if you're having some kind of a tribunal conference. And so I see a question popped up. Can you complete that document online? Absolutely. Yeah, while I'll put that back up for a second, and I'll show you how we can actually complete that document while I have the parties in the room. So if I'm down here, I can type in, you can see the document again. I can fill this out while I'm in the session, and they see the language we're going to use. Doesn't have to do it that way. If there's some benefit to it, especially with regard to dates, hearing dates, discovery cutoff dates, all quite useful for them to see it in black and white while we're doing it. Any document that you have, that you share, can be edited while the session is going on. There's also an opportunity to use Zoom. I set it up as a spreadsheet. We all are faced with, either as an advocate or as a member of a panel, with discovery compliance issues, right? And so here's an example of an Excel. It's basically a made-up document, so this doesn't apply to a particular case. but we can get information from both sides, and there's some dispute over whether or not a document request needs to be complied with. When we see these in a spreadsheet, it's quite helpful for the people to understand, and both sides see this. There's certain telephone logs regarding the transactions. The claimant wants them. The respondent is objecting because it's too broad of a scope and it's vague. We can decide to rule on it at the moment, or we can decide to delay our ruling on that. But as we're working through the documents, we can fill in the details. We may not have the scope. Maybe somebody says, I'm willing, instead of it from being from 2005, I can go to 2008, so we can change that scope right there, and everybody sees what's done. That document can be used or attached to an order, or it can be sent to the parties as a reminder of what their agreement was during the session. So you can use this document. May in fact come from a party, or it may be something that the tribunal has put together to focus the discussion during the discovery disputes. This is a very simple one. We have 18 or 20 requests that are in dispute. Becomes more valuable when there's many more documents that are subject to some discovery dispute. I think that's a second opportunity to use a video conference where we can look at a shared document. And that's the beauty of the video conference, is not so much that we see people face to face, but that we can look at the same document at the same time. That could in fact be a pleading instead of a summary of the issues that I prepared in Excel. So think about using video not just as a device to look at people and see them speak, but also as a device to share documents. And you may have edited that, they may have edited, you can highlight that. There's lots of things you can do with a document. The third thing we want to discuss with arbitration is we're going to look at and I'm going to show you only part of this witness testimony. We set this up as a demonstration of a Daubert hearing. So in other words, whether an expert was going to be, he was being voir dired on whether or not he was competent to testify as an expert in a arbitration case. Just 1 second, I'm going to get to the share screen. So we're going to look at evidence taking now. Keep in mind that in CPR cases, you're going to look at their protocols and guidelines. There's a lot of them. But this one, you may decide that under the protocol for disclosure of documents we looked at a little bit before, and the presentation of witnesses, there's certain protocols that panelists and parties will want to comply with. So check those guidelines. I think you'll see that on the website. They're quite easy to find. And so here's an example. I'm gonna speed through the beginning of this. This is a demonstration only of taking testimony on Zoom in an arbitration.
Morning, everybody. For the record, I'm Thomas Valenti, the agreed upon sole arbitrator in this case. Would counsel for the parties please identify themselves?
I'm Mishra Mahaj from Toronto, Canada, and I am the counsel for the claimants. Please raise your hand.
I'm Marietta Lodrigo from Thessaloniki, Greece, counsel for respondent, general elected.
Thank you. As you know, we're here today for a very limited purpose, and that's specifically to determine whether the witness, Mr. Parsons, is going to be able to testify at the ultimate hearing in this case. So the record is clear. Counsel for the defendant filed a motion in limine challenging the ability of Mr. Parsons' authenticity to testify. And we agreed on this expedited hearing, which I've limited with your permission, the time and scope of, for the sole purpose of determining whether or not he should be allowed to testify at the ultimate hearing in this case. Are both parties ready to proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Parsons, are you ready as well?
Yes, I am.
or I'm going to advance it a bit because we're going to go to the part where he's actually annotating documents and things like that. And then the full video will be available for you to watch from the Dropbox. But let's get to where we're actually looking at documents and pictures and videos during his testimony.
What we notice is in the bottom center, we see heavy burning of the appliance.
Here he's demonstrating how he is annotating the picture. This is Dr.
And if I may,
Mr. Parsons'
can I
duty.
draw on the,
Yes, with the arbitrator's permission.
Yes, Mr. Parsons, you may.
thank you. You have a heavy fire pattern at the bottom front as you face the dryer. And we see this V pattern that travels up. And what we noticed is behind this is the plastic trap duct. That is the fuel that burns and creates this fire pattern.
Mr. Arbitrator, if you will show Exhibit 3, I'm showing you, Mr. Parson, a videotape. We're just going to show a brief clip of it, which is marked as Exhibit 3.
So in this case, the exhibits were sent to me as the arbitrator, and I'm sharing the document because both parties agreed that these were pieces of evidence that they were going to be used in this witness's testimony for this limited purpose. We're now going to see how, in addition to looking at a document and annotating that, we can actually, through Zoom, have a witness play a video as a piece of evidence. And I'll start that video now.
Yes, one moment.
Of metal and woodwork, your background.
So I think for our purposes today, you can see that with a knowledgeable arbitrator who can instruct, obviously I instructed Mr. Parsons in how to annotate before the testimony, or perhaps his counsel did. And so as an advocate, if you were moving forward with a video arbitration hearing, you would want to make sure that your witness was prepared in annotation skills, and you would prep him or her to do that. And so in this particular case, we set this up as an example. We have Mr. Parsons was in one city, GE's attorney was in London at the moment, and the plaintiff's or petitioner's attorney was in Greece, and I was in Chicago. So in theory, instead of flying all of them to one place to have this hearing, which was limited in scope, maybe a 30-minute hearing at most, we could be efficient e-arbitrators and create a methodology for the matter to move along at limited cost and expense to each of the parties without any adverse influence. All the parties were willing to do that. And so you can be thinking about that in your cases as well. Is there some thing that we can do to advance our cases, either as advocates or as tribunals, during this period where we're not sure how we're going to be able to meet in person together? Let's look at Zoom and mediation now. And so we've all looked at ODR as online dispute resolution, and I ask you all to consider that online mediation is something quite different. You know, the ODR systems that we've heard about over the years are really negotiation algorithms that were put in place, really emanating way back when, in the days of eBay, when Colin Rule and his team put together dispute resolution methodologies for eBay, Amazon, and now being used in many places. When we began to look at online mediation, and the gentleman I mentioned early on, Giuseppe Leone, really was the pioneer at this, was really looking at conferencing tools to actually have a mediation. And so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at why this is, let me share this in a little easier way for you to see. So we're going to look at how it might work, how we might integrate some of these mediation tools into our practice, and what cases are probably the most suitable for online mediation. And so, and then we're going to talk about maybe what issues there are. Keep in mind, we don't teach online mediation to people as a way to learn mediation. We teach online mediation to experienced mediators who need to add another tool or might find a benefit to add another tool to what they do already. And so we don't recommend that somebody decide to become a mediator because you can do it online now. And so your mediation skills should be there already. And we're going to ask you to consider using some online tool to put in your toolkit. And so we know that the benefits of doing things online is that the geography of the world is now your office. We know that it's very flexible. You can do online mediation through Zoom, through all these different devices. We know that the parties can be lawyers, accountants, experts, financial planners, language translators, signers. All of those people we can bring into a Zoom room as and when needed and at minimal cost. We know that you can be anywhere doing this. You can be, as we all are now, somewhat confined to our home. You can be in your office, you can be on the road, you can be just about anywhere. And so how does it work? We have joint meetings, we have private meetings, and we actually can do all the same things. We give homework to people when we're in a private session with the other side. We do it in a bit of a modified way, and I'm going to give you some ideas about that in a session. But one of the advantages is that we can share information. We talked about that in the arbitration segment. We can share PDFs, we can share Excels, we can share Word documents, we can share pictures, we can share a website, and we can share videos. Probably any other thing that you have. You can actually, through Zoom, you can share your phone screen, your iPad screen. There's lots of different ways you can share information with the parties in your room. It's really the new toolkit. You know, you have lots of tools. You're going to add this to your toolkit. None of the things we've used in the past are exclusive. You know that already because you're getting, in mediations, you're getting documents by email, you're getting information through Dropbox, you're sharing lots of things in lots of different ways. So think about adding a video conferencing tool to your toolkit. One of the things that you want to consider in adding this element to it is building trust. We talked about a little bit about that already, and we'll mention it again in a second. And then this whole thing about body language, it has been something that people have questioned along the way. We all value our mediation skills as relying in great degree upon measuring body language and watching it and observing it. And I'll share with you, I've trained many people in this, and I'll share with you the observations that people have made about the ability to assess or monitor body language after we watch a little bit of a video in a second. So which cases are suitable? I don't think there's any limit to it now. I think we know we're going to have all of these attributes to it, and we can make mediation happen faster and in this period of isolation now. So let's watch a little bit of a demonstration. This was done some time ago, and I'm going to show you just a little bit of it, and then you'll have this full video online.
All right.
That's Giuseppe Leone.
Good evening, Rahim and Zoe. And thank you very much for contacting our online mediation center. So I'm going to step out of the online mediation room, and Tom, take it from there.
Thank you, Giuseppe. Hello, Rahim and Zoe.
Hi, Tom.
I know you know each other very well, but you haven't met me. So what I'd like to do is take just a few minutes and explain who I am and a little bit about mediation, and then we'll spend some time talking about your case. Are we ready to proceed?
Indeed.
Okay. Why don't we just start with a brief statement again, while we're all in this room together. First from Zoe, then from Rahim, about the issue that
Another 5 contracts at least was.
So this is a dispute between an employer and an employee. We're having a joint session. I'll show you. I'll advance it to a private session. We'll see how that works.
torn apart as people to a certain extent. You know?
Firm, do you know, in order to the permission of both of you, for me to have some private conversations now? Let me talk to Zoe first, privately. Let me ask you just a couple of questions about the firm. Do you know, in order to staff this $10 million project, how big the company is going to have to be in order to get this work done?
So when I have Raheem in a private breakout room, he sees a black screen that says you are on hold. He hears nothing and sees nothing in the other room. So right now I've set up breakout room with Zoe. She and I are both with our videos on. Raheem can't hear anything. I then do the same thing with Raheem. And then I bring them back together. And what we're really doing is assessing this case as, is it suitable for mediation? Is this something they want to pursue? And so we're going to move this forward, and I'll show you what we did next.
Talking. I think this is very important for us to solve this as soon as possible. And this has been very, very useful as a tool for us to come together. And I think would be great if we could do this.
For the next meeting, I think the issues that we want to discuss is how to move forward.
So this is an example of a mediator creating an agenda. I'm sharing the screen. This is, I can't remember if I'm using the whiteboard or a Word document, either way. I'm creating the agenda with them for the mediation that's going to take place next week. And they're both going to give us input in creating this agenda. And we conclude the session with an agenda for the next session. Very useful tool on how to guide the parties towards the next session. Not hard to do at all. We'll just play another few seconds of this.
As a team, how to look at potential partners.
Yes.
You can see I'm not the best typist.
The role of each in selecting partners.
Indeed.
May I add some?
So Zoe's going to add something. Then I'll take you.
Now that the mediation is over, now we can start the debriefing session. Okay.
For me, it was very exciting. I felt very secure, and I think it's because of Tom too. It was very easy for me to open up during the private session.
So obviously that's a scripted. Those are friends of mine. Some of you know them already. So we were doing a debriefing about how they felt about being a participant in an online mediation session. And so I'm going to give you check our time. I'm going to show you how we can do a couple things. Let's look at how we can annotate a photo using some annotation tools that Zoom has. Obviously, this is not a photo from a case, but if you look at the annotation tools on the top of the screen, I'm clicking this pencil or icon that says annotate. You're going to see a drop-down menu, right? From there, there's lots of things that you can choose. Somebody was trying one of these already. And so I can click draw, and I can decide to highlight the Tuborg beer. I can click an arrow like this. If I want to highlight my friend Fabio's nose, I can do that. I can actually put text in here. All of that can be done. You saw Mr. Parsons do that with the dryer using different tools, the annotation tool. Somebody's doing it now. You see Janice has used the stamp there. When she's there, it says who's annotating it. And so we know that Janice has just put an arrow by his eye. And so the annotation tool is available to everyone in your session, and we can use it for a lot of different purposes. We can also clear all of the annotations with one click of the clear button. let's look at, and you might need to do other things on this document by highlighting things, selecting parts of it, but it's quite easy to annotate. It's quite easy to teach someone to annotate a document. If I wanted to use the whiteboard feature, I'm going to show you that now. When you use the whiteboard feature, what it does, it just brings this blank screen to the room. And then I'm going to tell it to choose text. And so I can say, if I want to make an agenda from scratch, I can do that. I can actually pass control of this and have someone else type on it. I can decide that for someone else, I can change the color so that you're writing in red, I'm writing in blue. I can also decide on the whiteboard to use different things for some reason. If I wanted to for some reason, if I felt the need to use circles, maybe use an arrow to create a timeline for someone to show progress on a work site or something like that. There's lots of devices that we can use, and I can save this whiteboard and email it to everybody when it's done.
There's been some questions about actually how you access, or like how you would call up the whiteboard or access those tools. Can you just touch on that briefly?
Oh, sure. So what I did is on the bottom of the screen, you can see the dashboard at the bottom where it says share screen. I click share screen, and then it's going to show me what's on my computer. And right now I have my desktop, I have the Fabio photo, I have the PowerPoint, and I'm going to click whiteboard. And then I click the blue button that says share, and I'm sharing my whiteboard. If I end that and I want to go back to the Fabio photo, I can go to share screen, and I can go back to the photo, click that, click share. As a Zoom user, the advice that you get is every document that you want to share should be open on your laptop or your desktop already. So it's really easy once you have the documents open to click them, because they'll all appear in that share screen device. If you don't have that open, you got to go back and open an Excel, the program, or the Word program, or anything like that. And so the documents are quite easy to use. So I'm going to just do a quick demo of the breakout rooms now. Let's stop screen sharing and show you. We can't do it because it's not on my account. But if I was going to put breakout rooms in here, on the bottom of the screen there would be an icon that says breakout rooms. And then it asks me how many breakout rooms I want, and then who I'm assigning to each breakout room. I'm going to give you a couple of tips before we go to questions, and we'll go back to the PowerPoint for this. When you're mediating online, you're going to make a few modifications to your process. You're going to probably have that pre-mediation meeting. You're going to remember to address the parties by name. Why do we do that? Is because nobody knows who you're talking to unless I say, Mark, I have a question for you. If I just speaking to the room, everybody doesn't know. I'm not being able to make eye contact with each person as I do across the table. So remember to address everybody by name as you're going through your session. We'd like you to demonstrate that hold feature so that they know they can begin to trust you, that what they say in a private room is purely private. When I put somebody in a caucus, I tell them how long they're going to be there. there's always a fear when we work online that you got disconnected, right? You never know when there's silence for 8-10 minutes. You always think, well, are they coming back or are they not? And so I tell people, I'll be back in about 10 minutes. If I'm running overtime, I go back and say, I break into that room and say, I'll be back in 2 more minutes. And so we are a little bit more conscious about our time online than we are when they're down the hall in one of our conference rooms. One of the things that we learned through training was that it's in the breakout room, it's very, we learned that it was strange if I put someone in a room and the video was on, all of a sudden I appeared in their room out of nowhere. I didn't knock on the door. Usually when we have a party down the hall, we knock on the door and open the door, right? And so we developed a door knock system, much the same for online mediation, so that I tell people when they're a private session, turn their audio and video off. And when I come back in, I'm audio only, and I say, are you ready for me? If they say yes, they turn their video and their video on, and then now we're face to face again. And we decided that it was just too intrusive to all of a sudden appear in someone's room without letting them know in advance. So it's a nice tool to use. It's quite easy to use once you get the hang of it. There's always about a 1-second delay, so we let parties know that in advance, so that they're not interrupting as you slow everything down just a hair. We talked about this already, that we expect parties to be alone in the room, get some confirmation of that. And I'll talk about this plan B, that we always want you to have when you're doing online sessions, a plan B. And that's in the event of an interruption of internet service. We have an email exchange or a text or something that somebody can communicate with each other if the Wi-Fi connection goes out for some reason, that there's going to be a backup method of communication to work us through the Wi-Fi problem. Use email, a telephone number, or a text message as a plan B. Let the parties, advocates, whoever you're working with, let them know in advance that these can happen for a variety of reasons, especially if you're working in some countries where there's difficulties with internet connection. We ask them to turn off all their other software programs. Many people don't have the same bandwidth that we have as practitioners. Parties don't always have that, so we tell them, shut down everything except your email connection, get off your browsers, shut down all your other programming. Ask them to mute their cell phones. We still talk to them about voluntariness of mediation, but it's quite easy for somebody online to leave a meeting. You know, it's much easier for them to leave a session than if they're in our offices. And so we ask them, we remind them about that, and ask them the same as we do in a face-to-face session, give me a chance to straighten out if something's not going well. And so those kinds of things, we remind them. They can take notes if they want to, that we like to have them shred it. We lock the room, as we talked about before. We know that there are pros and cons to online mediation. When we were training people, everybody by default, and this goes back 4 or 5 years, that it's not the same, it's going to be difficult. I'm not going to believe it when I see it, but we're at that point now that we're seeing it, and you can't have that mindset any longer. When we trained with people, these are the feedback items that we got from them. It's much easier than I thought it was ever going to be. I can use it right away. There's no huge training curve, and it does in fact open up new possibilities and new markets. None of us thought that we were going to have new markets and possibilities as the result of a pandemic. But we can look at this as a push to get us to bring new skills to our practice. And I encourage all of you to take a look at whatever program you want to use, bring it into your practice. I think there's lots of people out there that want your services now. And you just have to increase your skill set or practice a little bit more and bring these tools to your practice already. With that, we're about time for Q&A. Happy to stay on as long as anybody wants to review anything we've talked about. or answer any further questions.
Thanks, Tom. I have been aggregating the questions, so we can go through the mediation questions first and then the arbitration questions. We know that it's 1:30, so if anyone needs to jump off, feel free. But those who are able, you're welcome to stay on for the Q&A and to add any additional questions in the group chat. So for the mediations, there's been some questions about the breakout rooms. Some wanted to know if you as a mediator stay in the main room with the person you're caucusing with and put the non-caucusing party in a breakout room or vice versa.
Whatever you wish. So there are times when I create a breakout room for the requesting party and their counsel in one session, and the responding party and their counsel are in another session, and I'm in neither one of them. Maybe I need a break to organize what I'm going to do next. I will then go to one room, and because I might have set it up as a caucus and say, I'll be with you in a few minutes. And then I go there using that door knock feature. I'll have my video off and I'll just use my audio and say, are you ready for me to join you? They say yes, then we're all live, and I'm with those two parties. If I wanted to have a session without the client there, with a lawyer alone, I can put the client in his or her own breakout room and have a private session with counsel only. So the Zoom, there's unlimited number of Zoom rooms, and you can put people in and out of rooms whatever you want. I can recreate the rooms as I need it during the session. It's extremely flexible. And so you have many options available to you as the host.
And Tom, how do you actually do that? I know that you can't really show maybe that part of the screen, but can you describe how you would move people?
So when I host a meeting, at the bottom of my bar, there's a few extra things, and it's the poll feature, and it's it's called breakout rooms. You click breakout rooms, and a pop-up comes up. It's quite simple. It asks you, how many rooms do you want? And you say 1, 10, whatever you want. There's a drop down that says assign randomly, or you will assign. On the right-hand side of that box are all the participants. And so I say breakout room 1, and I put Mark and Alan in breakout room 1. I go to breakout room 2, and I say assign Tom and Anna to breakout room number 2. I click end. In about 3 seconds or so, they're in their own rooms. It moves them automatically. They're gone, and there's nobody in the main room any longer. When I want to visit that room as the host, I can choose what room I want to go to. And I can choose when to end that room. I can also choose to end the breakouts in 10 minutes. If I'm doing a webinar or some kind of teaching modality, and I've put students in 3 or 4 different rooms, I might say you have 10 minutes to do this work on your own. And at the end of 10 minutes, everybody's back in the main room. Very flexible feature. But for our mediations, you have the ability to create new breakout rooms during the session without starting a new session. You just start a new assignment for breakout rooms. Quite easy.
And another question was, if someone accidentally drops off while in a breakout room, do you have to go back to the main room to let them back in?
Yeah, you'll see that. You'll see who's where, and if somebody they would have had to have left the meeting in order to leave a breakout room. They would have had to hang up, so to speak, right? And so I would hear, because I have the chime feature on my setup, I would hear somebody left, and that would alert me to go look at my participant screen and see. For example, let me see if I can share my desktop, and then you'll see what I mean by participant screen. No, it's not there. Hold on. I picked the wrong one. It's not showing it when I'm doing that. Sorry. But you'll see who that when you're able to see everybody who's in the meeting, and it gives you the ability to hear when somebody left and solve that problem, especially if you have a plan B. That person may have lost their internet connection, or they may got mad at somebody and left the mediation. And so because we have a plan B, I can text that person or call that person or email that person and say what happened. And then depending upon my setup, I either invite them back in or they're able to join automatically if I don't have that feature locked where it says if you left the meeting, you don't get to come back in. But we can manage all that. There was another question.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I saw it and I lost here. John Land's asking, how often do you do mediation in several parts instead of a single session? I think these are, especially with with people in different geographic locations, we use it in several sessions. We have a pre-mediation session. That might be 2 or 3 different sessions privately, because sometimes they're in different time zones or geographies. And so then we bring them all together at an odd time that's convenient to both of them. But we do use Zoom often instead of one main session, depending upon what it's about and depending upon what the needs of those parties are. And so it's quite easy because it's easy to schedule. If you combine your online mediation tool with some scheduling device, I use Doodle, you use something like that, and you can get the parties to schedule those sessions with you without you or your staff spending an inordinate amount of time eating up, trying to figure out who can be here, when, and there. And so if you combine a couple of these new technologies, you'll find that your schedule is becoming more useful because you're not spending lots of time scheduling. The devices are scheduling for you. And so I encourage you to use one of those scheduling devices as well. And I don't think there's any cost to Doodle these days. And so there's lots of things you can do to make this quite easy for you. I don't know Microsoft Team. I suspect that I know Microsoft Team. Peter has editing documents and things together. We do that. On Zoom, we can edit documents together quite easily. We can use it to share different versions of documents, but my guess is because of Microsoft's dedication to their software applications, there's probably lots of different integrations with Microsoft Team that we don't have in Zoom.
There were a few questions with regard to arbitrations and the use of transcripts. So is there a possibility of displaying a transcript in real time, like a live note transcript or other on the screen along with the witness or examining counsel?
Yes, that's I believe Zoom now has an added paid feature to create a voice-to-text transcript of the audio recording. I don't use that, but I think for a fee, that's available to Zoom users now, and it's an outside provider. It's a third-party provider that will actually transcribe the audio from your video recording. When you record, it's quite automatic. When the session's over, it takes a certain amount of minutes to end up creating a YouTube video. I use, for another purpose, I use a platform called Otter. And I can take an audio recording and play that into Otter, and it produces a voice-to-text transcript within some minutes as well. And so there's, and anybody's welcome to contact me offline to get access to some of these other devices. But depending upon what you need, your technology is available to do almost anything. But I think most parties can use just the videotaped recording as a transcript if that's needed in arbitration. Anybody else?
Can you allocate recording time for arguments and cross-examination?
In an arbitration, the whole thing will be recorded. We can end the recording and start a new one. If we wanted to record separately the argument, we can do that. We can end one recording and then start a new one and have the argument recorded separately, yes. If I understood the question right.
It looks like Richard Ziegler had a follow-up question about the transcript. Let's see.
Oh yeah, you can use a court. You can have a court reporter, of course. You could have attend your arbitration. You can have a court reporter invited, and produce a normal transcript as well. The court reporter would be in his or her location, and we would just want to make sure that we tested, the sound to make sure that that person was going to produce the quality of transcript that we needed. So we would run a little test of everybody's voice and sound and all that to make sure that it was working. But you can get a real transcript as if we were face to face as well. Yeah. Can it be displayed during the hearing, Richard? I don't know. I think if we wanted to have that screen shared, we could do that. I've never done it, but I think the technology would exist to have us share that screen like I was sharing the documents or the PowerPoint, and have the screen share be the live note transcript. Interesting idea.
And then there were some questions earlier about the private chat functions, like this group chat that we're doing on the side. Folks wanted to know if you can disable the private chat entirely so a party can't coach its witness during remote testimony, and whether the private chat is really private, or is it possible that a participant could save and download the chat?
Yes, you can disable the private chat, and yes, you can decide that it's not saved. And so depending upon your session, you would make those choices. And most likely in an arbitration, in most settings, we would disable the chat because we don't really, in an arbitration, we don't really want that going on. But you certainly can protect against those interferences.
Okay, and then the last questions were about the host function. Folks wanted to know, how do you pass the host function to somebody else? And can you assign a host through your Zoom account?
You can do it online. For example, Richard passed me the host function. I'm a co-host with him within the platform itself, right online, not in advance. You can set up a meeting in advance to have more than one host, but you can also do it online, and I can pass control back and forth when I'm the host.
Great, and somebody had asked if you had a written template that you would be willing to share that briefly explains to lawyers and their clients the basics of the Zoom process, so they can be prepared even if the neutrals don't have time to do practice sessions.
I don't have a written template, but I think you'll find I tried to put a lot of materials in our shared folder, our CPR shared folder, that includes a lot of tips. And if someone, I'm pretty findable, just email me, and I might have something else that I didn't think of putting in there. If there's some specific need, I'm happy to help anybody with something like that. But I can't think of a template that I have available right now. But just send me an email, and I can search for something.
Thank you so much. So I'm just gonna pass this briefly to Alan Waxman, CPR's President and CEO, to close us out.
Yes, thank you so much, Tom. And actually, if I could ask everybody to join me, one other tip on Zoom, I know a number of you know this, is the virtual hand clap here. Why don't we all give Tom a virtual ovation here. Wonderful session. I really think it's just terrific for us to be learning together in real time. And it sounds like, from what Tom is saying, it's useful for us all to go out now and just practice, maybe pair off, buddy pairs with one another, and really just get on Zoom and give it a whirl and try the different functions, much like we do with other technologies. That may be the best way to learn. And we can follow up and see about exploring follow-up sessions, be it with Tom or others on this technology or others technologies. I just think it's great adaptability to find different tools we can use during this time. Thank you for joining us for this. As Anna mentioned earlier, we are doing a variety of different programs relating to how to operate and how to conduct ADR during the time of COVID. Go to our website under Resource Center, and you will see a page we've set aside for various offerings along those lines. And at CPR, we also continue a number of our other offerings, and we have upcoming now on April 7th, our Arbitration Committee will be meeting on April 27th. Our Banking and Finance Committee will be meeting on April 29th. The Insurance Committee will be having a webinar, and on May 5th, our Diversity Task Force will be convening again. And as all of you as members are invited to join us in those. And please do let us know, drop me a note how you're doing, any ideas that you might have. We always enjoy getting together, and I think it's especially meaningful to see faces during this time. So Tom, thank you once again, virtual ovation. And thanks to all of you for giving us your time.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.